Welcome to Quiet History at Bedtime. If you are new here, this channel is very new. And if this kind of storytelling is something you have been looking for, slow history, second-person narration, a place to put your mind before sleep, please subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell. It means a great deal. Now, set everything else down. You have nowhere to be tonight. Let your body settle into wherever you are lying. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands open. There is nothing to hold on to right now, nothing to manage. Only this voice and the dark, and a story from very long ago. Breathe in slowly and out. Your jaw can unclench. Your eyes can close. You are completely safe. The night is long and you are already beginning to rest. Make sure every video on this channel is based on real historical facts and carefully grounded in historical research. Imagine you are somewhere very old. The year is 1158. The north of England, not the far north, not the bare moors and the peat water, but the middle country, where the land is soft and rolling, and the rivers run along the valley floors, and the wind carries the smell of the sea even a full day's ride inland. There is a convent here, a Benedictine house, 80 years old, built from the local stone, which is gray and dense, and which has absorbed over 80 years every season this land can produce. It holds cold in December the way a well holds water. It holds heat in August like a thing that has learned patience. You have been inside these walls for 11 years. You came at 14. Your father brought you, a minor landholder, a man with enough daughters and not enough dowry money to dispose of them all through marriage. The church offered a different arrangement, a permanent home, the dignity of the veil, your prayers as currency in the economy of souls that families understood and depended on. The required dowry for entry into this house was negotiated across a single conversation between your father and the abbess in the parlor, while you sat on a bench in the cloister walk and looked at the apple tree in the garth and understood, with the particular clarity of a 14-year-old who has been told a decision has already been made, that this would be your world for the rest of your life. You made your permanent vows at 15. Poverty, chastity, obedience, and the fourth Benedictine vow, stabilitas, stability, the promise to remain in this house, this specific community, this stone, for the remainder of your days. You lay prostrate on the chapel floor with your arms extended while the choir sang above you. The abbess placed the black veil on your head. From that moment you became, formally and finally, a member of this body. Now you are 25. You know every flagstone in the cloister walk, and every draught in the dormitory, and every voice in the choir. You know the smell of this place at every hour. Tallow at Compline, bread from the bakehouse at Prime, the cold stone of the night stairs at vigils, the kitchen herbs in summer, carried through the kitchen court window into the chapter house. You have spent 11 years learning this place from the inside, the way a river learns its channel. This is your life. You have made it yours. And 3 nights ago, something happened in the scriptorium after Compline that you cannot take back. Stone walls, a narrow window, the smell of tallow smoke and cold air, and something underneath. The beeswax of 8 decades of feast day candles absorbed into the stone, released whenever the room grows warm. You are inside the dormitory. The great silence has begun, and you are not asleep. The night was cold. It is still cold. The bell for vigils struck 2 hours ago, and you rose from your pallet and went to choir and chanted the psalms in the dark, the way you have done for 11 years. And you returned to the dormitory and lay back down, and you have not slept since. You are lying on your back with your eyes open. The stone ceiling is the same as it has always been. The elm trees outside the dormitory window shift in the wind, which is the same as it has always been. Everything in this room is unchanged, and you are lying inside it like a person who has walked into a room that looks exactly like the room they left and is slowly understanding that it is not the same room at all. Sister Marjorie's curtain is 4 cells down from yours, on the same side of the dormitory. You cannot hear her breathing at this distance, and you do not try to. You have been, for the past 2 hours, very carefully not trying. 3 nights ago, you were in the scriptorium after Compline. This is the fact. This is the single fact from which everything else now proceeds. The great silence had begun. The community had dispersed toward the dormitory. You had turned back from the night stairs because you had left your ruled sheet uncovered, and an uncovered sheet can warp overnight in the scriptorium's cold. A small enough error, the kind that takes 2 minutes to remedy, the kind that does not require announcement or permission. You went back. The scriptorium was dark except for the lamp you took from the corridor sconce. You went in and covered your sheet and straightened the exemplar and were turning to go. She was there. She had come back for the same reason, or a different one, and she was standing at the far end of the long oak desk with a lamp in her hand, and the 2 of you looked at each other across the dark scriptorium, the way 2 people look at each other when they are in a place where they are not supposed to be, which is to say, with a completeness that ordinary daylight does not usually allow. You know the rest. You were there. What you did not know, or did not think about, or did not allow yourself to think about, was Sister Joan. Sister Joan had also come back for something. A missal left on the lectern, retrieved quietly in the dark. She had passed the scriptorium doorway. She had seen the 2 lamps burning where no lamps should be burning at this hour. She had not said anything. She went to the dormitory and drew her curtain and lay down. And you know this only now, in the dark before dawn, because you can feel the weight of what she knows pressing through 4 stone walls, like water through old mortar. You breathe. The stone ceiling does not change. The elm trees shift and settle and shift again. The community breathes around you in the deep dark, 22 sleeping women, and somewhere in their number 1 woman who is not sleeping for the same reason you are not sleeping, and somewhere another woman lying 4 cells away whose curtain is a rectangle of undyed linen and who is as present to you right now as the stone under your back. You breathe in and out. What happens next has a procedure. You know the procedure because you have lived inside the rule for 11 years, and the rule addresses everything. It addresses the keeping of silence, and the manner of eating, and the reception of guests, and the correction of faults. It addresses what must be done when a member of the community has committed an offense that falls outside the ordinary scope of the chapter meeting. It describes the progression of correction. First, a private word offered by a senior sister or the prioress in the spirit of Matthew chapter 18. If your brother sins against you, go to him privately. If he does not hear you, take one or two others. If he does not hear them, bring it before the assembly. This is the structure of fraternal correction, the correctio fraterna, and it has governed the internal discipline of monastic communities since the rule was written in the 6th century. What happened in the scriptorium 3 nights ago is not the kind of thing that resolves in a private word. You know this. You have known it since the moment you walked back to the dormitory with your lamp and your covered sheet and your completely steady hands, and lay down and stared at the ceiling and understood, as cleanly as you have ever understood anything, that something had changed in the permanent register of things. The bell for lauds will come soon. You will rise and smooth your habit and go to chapel and sing the morning psalms, and the singing will be what it always is, because the psalms hold everything and exclude nothing, and your voice will find its place in the choir's sound the way it always does, and you will stand in your stall and she will stand in hers. You have known, since before lauds, that this moment was coming, the moment of standing in the stall with the knowledge that she is standing in hers. You have been turning it over in the dark for 3 nights, and you know something about it that you did not know before it happened, that you cannot rehearse it sufficiently. No amount of prior thought prepares you for the actual moment of standing in the actual stall at the actual hour with the actual sound of the actual choir beginning. The preparation is not useless, but the thing itself is the thing itself, and it will be what it is when it is. And somewhere between the north stalls and the south stalls, Sister Joan will stand in her own stall with what she saw 3 nights ago, and the question of what she does with it will belong entirely to her. You close your eyes. The lauds bell finds you before you sleep. You rise. The chapter meeting is held every morning after prime in the chapter house. The chapter house is the square room off the east cloister walk, stone benches along 3 walls, the abbess's chair at the north end. Every full member of the community attends. The agenda follows its customary order. The reading from the Rule of St. Benedict, the commemoration of any saints whose feast falls that day, the announcement of the day's work assignments, and then the space reserved for what the rule calls the accusation of faults, the opportunity for a sister to confess an error she has committed, or for another sister to raise a concern. Most chapter meetings pass through the fault accusation quietly. Minor things, a cup broken in the refectory, a word spoken during the silence, lateness to an office, a look given in a way that a senior sister found proud. These are addressed with brief, proportionate correction, assigned penances that are specific and finite. 3 extra prostrations, a day of fasting on bread and water, the recitation of a particular psalm at a particular office for a week. The rule is clear that correction is medicine, not punishment. The abbess is to exercise the discretion of a physician who knows that different ailments require different remedies, and that the remedy must be measured to the patient, not to the offense in the abstract. This morning you sit on the north bench and listen to the abbess read from chapter 64, on the ordination of the abbess. You listen to the Latin with the part of you that has heard it many times, and you feel the stone bench under your thighs, and the wool of your habit against your ankles, and the small, discreet pressure of your own breathing. The rule moves through the chapter house at the pace of the abbess's voice. The community sits. After the reading, after the saints, after the work assignments, the prioress, not the abbess, the prioress, which tells you something about the level at which this has already been handled before this morning, rises and says she has a matter to bring before the chapter. The chapter house is completely still. You do not look at the prioress, you look at the stone floor. The prioress speaks in measured Latin, which is the language of all formal proceedings in this house. She describes what was seen. She names the 2 sisters. She uses the phrase amicitia specialis, and then, more carefully, a phrase from the penitential literature that you have heard only in the context of texts, never spoken aloud in a room you were sitting in. Actus contra naturam, act against nature. She does not elaborate. She does not need to. The phrase carries its full weight, established through 5 centuries of penitential theology, beginning with John the Faster's 6th century penitential, and carried through Bede and Alcuin, and every subsequent confessor's handbook. And it sits in the chapter house air, like a stone dropped into still water. You look at the floor. The floor is limestone. Each flag is roughly 18 inches square. The one directly in front of your feet has a slight crack running northeast from its near edge. A crack you have looked at many times, for 11 years, in this same seat. You know this crack. The chapter of faults is documented in the earliest Benedictine customaries, the secondary texts that translate the rule's principles into the specific procedures of particular houses. The customary of this house, written 70 years ago by the second abbess and revised twice since, sets out the procedure with careful specificity. A fault may be self-declared or declared by a witness. Both are equally valid. Neither carries additional weight over the other. The witness has an obligation to come forward. The rule treats the concealment of a known fault as itself a fault. Sister Joan did what she was required to do. You have sat with this fact for 3 nights, and you have reached the same conclusion each time. She did what she was required to do. The penitential tradition that governs what comes after a declaration is old and varied. The earliest penitential books, the Irish penitentials of the 6th and 7th centuries, Columbanus and Finian and Cumian, manuscripts copied in continental monasteries and carried across Europe by Irish missionaries, assigned specific penances to specific faults with a precision that is almost notarial. For acts between women in religious life, the penitentials prescribe between 1 and 7 years of fasting and penance, depending on the nature and degree of the act, and whether the parties were professed religious or lay people. 7 years is the severe end of the scale, prescribed by Bede's ecclesiastical text for cases of persistent, unrepented behavior. The books written closer to this century have softened slightly, not in their judgment of the act, but in their recognition that the purpose of penance is restoration, not permanent exclusion, and that a penance so severe it breaks the person cannot serve the purpose of medicine. This tension between justice and healing, between the gravity of the fault and the cost of the remedy, is the tension the abbess was managing in her chair this morning. 40 days, in this context, is the measured middle of the available range. You sit on the stone bench and receive the sentence, and you understand, somewhere below the sadness, that you were measured carefully. The abbess says, "Sister," she says your name. You stand. Your knees hold. You are grateful for this in a way that is entirely below language. Your knees hold, and you stand, and you say, "It is true." 2 words. They are the only 2 words required, and they are accurate, and you say them clearly enough for the room to hear. The abbess says, "Sit down." She says Sister Marjorie's name. Across the chapter house, you do not look, but you hear the wool and the sandals. She stands. She says, "It is true." She sits. The chapter house breathes. 21 women who are not you and are not her, sitting on stone benches with whatever they are carrying in their own chests. And you cannot know what that is, but you can feel the weight of the room the way you can feel weather coming before it arrives, the change in the air, the thickness of a particular silence. The abbess sits with the matter for a moment. This is her right and her responsibility. The rule gives her the full discretion of judgment. She can, in theory, dismiss the matter with a private correction. She can address it publicly and assign a light penance. She can assign a severe penance and have it observed publicly. She can, in extreme cases, involve the bishop, a step taken only when the internal capacity of the community to manage a fault has been exhausted, a step that would bring outside scrutiny into a house that has managed its own affairs for 80 years, a step that benefits no one. The abbess has governed this community for 16 years. She is not an impulsive woman. She is not, in your experience, a cruel one. She is a woman who carries the weight of 23 souls committed to her keeping, and who understands, with the particular understanding that 16 years of this work provides, that the medicine must be proportionate, that a severe remedy applied to a wound that does not require it can do its own damage. She speaks. The sentence is as follows. Both sisters are to be separated from the choir and from the common life for a period of 40 days. The number is not arbitrary. You register this even now. 40 being the number of Christ's days in the desert, the number of days of the flood, the number of years in the wilderness, a biblical unit of probation and transformation. For 40 days you will not attend the divine office in choir. You will observe the hours in your cell, alone, in silence, reciting the Psalms from memory without the support of community or voice. You will take meals separately, brought to your cell by the extern sister on the fasting portion, bread, water, and on certain days a small measure of pottage. You will perform the discipline, the self-flagellation with the knotted cord kept in the abbess's room, applied to the back and shoulders, 3 times weekly, at the hours of terce, sext, and nun, in your cell, in silence. And you will not, for the 40 days, see or communicate with each other in any form. At the end of 40 days, both sisters will appear before the chapter and ask readmission to the community. If the abbess judges that the penance has been genuinely observed, readmission will be granted. The matter will not be referred to the bishop. The matter will be considered resolved within this house. You stand when the abbess says your name again. You receive the sentence. You say, "I accept this correction with a grateful heart," which are the words the rule prescribes for the reception of correction. And you mean them, not entirely, not without the complicated grief that is also present, but enough. You mean them enough. The chapter is dismissed. You walk to the dormitory and sit on the edge of your pallet with your hands in your lap. The knotted cord is brought to you that afternoon by the prioress, who does not speak beyond what is necessary. She sets it on the shelf above the pallet and leaves. You look at it for a long time. It is linen rope, the thickness of a finger, with 3 knots spaced along its length. It is not unfamiliar to you in concept. The discipline is referenced in the rule's discussion of corporal penance, practiced in various forms across the monastic tradition, documented in the writings of the Desert Fathers from the 4th century onward. You have never held one before. You put it on the shelf facing the wall. You will use it at terce. The cell is approximately 6 feet by 4 feet. Stone walls, stone floor, the curtain at the front. Your pallet, your shelf, your small wooden cross hung above the shelf. A bucket brought by the extern sister. A jug of water. Nothing else. In this space, for 40 days, you will observe the full arc of each day alone. The 8 canonical hours in memory, the prayers recited from what your mind holds. You know the Psalms almost completely from 11 years of daily repetition. There are psalters somewhere inside you that require only a starting line to unroll themselves, verse by verse, in the dark. You know Psalm 22 by heart so deeply it has grooves in you. You know Psalm 42, as the deer longs for streams of water, the one about longing, with a thoroughness you now understand differently than you did this morning. The first night is the hardest, not because of the physical cold, though the cell is colder than the dormitory without the warmth of 22 other bodies on the other side of the curtain. Not because of the hard bread, which is what it is. The hardest part of the first night is the absence of the office. You are accustomed, in a way that is structural rather than merely habitual, to having your day organized by sound. The bells, the community rising together, the cantor intoning, the psalms building from one side of the choir to the other and returning. That sound is not here. What you have instead is your own voice, speaking quietly into 4 walls. The the psalms returning from wherever you have been storing them and arriving in the air of the cell like breath made visible in cold air. You recite the Compline Psalms alone. The experience of reciting the Psalms alone is unlike the experience of reciting them in choir, and the difference is instructive in a way you have not had occasion to understand before. In choir, the Psalms are supported. The cantor intones, the community responds, the sound builds on itself, and you are held inside a structure of sound that exists independently of your own attention on any given morning. On a bad morning, a morning when you are tired or distracted or in the grip of something that refuses to let you rest, you can be carried through the office by the community's sound, even when your own voice is barely there. The structure is larger than you. This is not a weakness in you. It is a feature of the office as Benedict designed it. No one person must bear the whole weight. Alone in the cell, there is no one to carry you. The Psalms exist only insofar as you produce them. If your attention drifts in the middle of Psalm 68, the psalm stops. You must find your place again and resume. The psalm does not continue without you. This is a different form of prayer than the one you have practiced for 11 years. It is more exposed. It requires more of you in the specific and unglamorous sense of requiring your continuous presence. Not your peak devotion, not your best voice, but simply your showing up, your continuing to produce the words even on the days when the words feel like nothing more than sounds. The Desert Fathers understood this. Abba Moses, whose sayings appear in the Apopthegmata Patrum, the collected wisdom of the early desert monastics, passed from teacher to student and eventually written down, said, "Stay in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." The cell teaches by removing all the supports that ordinarily keep you from knowing what you actually are. You are, it turns out, a person who knows a great many psalms. The cell confirms this. You are also a person whose mind drifts and returns and drifts again, who finds silence sometimes a relief and sometimes an oppression, who is capable of genuine prayer and also of 40-minute stretches in which the words are present and the interior is somewhere else entirely. You are a person who needs, on the days when you need it, the sound of 22 other voices to carry you. This is what you are. The cell is not telling you anything your confessor did not already suspect. But there is a difference between knowing something abstractly and learning it with your whole body over 40 days of stone walls and a strip of sky. Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High rests in the shadow of the Almighty. You will not fear the terror of the night, the trap of the hunter, the arrow that flies by day. You do not fear. You are sad, which is a different thing. The sadness is specific, not diffuse, not general. Specific, the way the cold floor is specific, with a particular quality and weight. You are sad that it cannot be undone. You are sad for her, whose cell is somewhere in this building. You do not know where the prioress has placed her, because part of the separation is not knowing where the other person is, and who is also alone tonight, also reciting psalms into cold stone walls. You are sad for Sister Joan, who saw what she saw and had to decide what to do with it, and who did what the rule asked of her, which is its own burden. You are sad for the community, for the 21 women who sat in the chapter house this morning and received this disturbance into the common life they have built, who will absorb it and continue, because communities absorb and continue, but who are carrying something extra now, something that did not come with them to morning prayer yesterday. The sadness is not regret, exactly. The theological tradition you have been raised inside draws a careful distinction between two forms of sorrow for wrongdoing: attrition and contrition. Attrition is the sorrow that arises from fear, fear of punishment, fear of hell, fear of what is going to happen to you. Contrition is the sorrow that arises from love, from the genuine recognition that something has been broken between you and God, between you and the community, between the person you intend to be and the person you were in the moment of the fault. Attrition is useful as a beginning. Contrition is what the sacramental tradition is actually after. The confessor's handbooks are emphatic on this point. The form of the penance matters less than the quality of the sorrow that underlies it, and the quality of the sorrow can only be assessed over time, in the actual living of the corrected life, not in the performance of the initial act of contrition. You sit with this taxonomy in the dark of the first night, and you try to locate yourself in it honestly. The honesty is necessary because the tradition does not benefit from dishonesty about the interior life. The tradition is built on the assumption that the interior can be examined and that the examination is worth doing. What you find is something that does not map cleanly onto either category. It is not fear that you feel. You have received the sentence. The sentence is fair by the standards available. There is nothing coming that is worse than what has been assigned. And it is not quite the clean grief of contrition either, the uncomplicated recognition of separation from what is right. What you feel is more specific and more tangled than either. It is the grief of a person who loves two things that are genuinely in conflict, who cannot love one without the conflict with the other becoming real, and who is not able, simply by deciding, to stop loving either one. You are not sure where this maps onto the taxonomy. You suspect it maps onto humanity rather than theology. This distinction is something you sit with in the long first night, turning it over the way you turn a root in the soil to see what is underneath. Regret would mean wishing it had not happened. What you feel is something more like wishing the consequences could be removed from the fact, wishing the fact could exist without consequence, which is a wish available only to children and not reliably even to them. The fact happened. The consequences are real. Both of these are simply true, and you are lying in the dark holding both of them. And there is no psalm that resolves this, but there are many psalms that know it. 3 times weekly you take the knotted cord from the shelf and use it as the rule of penance prescribes. The practice of corporal discipline in religious communities traces to the desert fathers of the 4th and 5th centuries, Evagrius, John Cassian, the abbas, whose sayings were collected in the Apophthegmata Patrum and copied in scriptoria like the one 12 feet from your cell. The theological logic is specific. The body participated in the fault, and the body participates in the remedy. This is not hatred of the body. The tradition is careful about this, though not always careful enough. The body is not the enemy. The body is the site of the spiritual life, the place where God is encountered and where God is failed, and where the return to God happens. Always in the body, always through the body, never above it. You hold the cord and feel its weight and think about this. The actual application is less dramatic than the concept. The cord is applied to the shoulders and upper back. It stings. It raises marks that fade in 2 days. It is not, in the scale of what the body can suffer, a severe thing. Peter Damian, who wrote the Liber Gomorrhianus, the Book of Gomorrah, in the previous century and presented it to Pope Leo IX as a systematic indictment of sexual sins in religious life, advocated for corporal punishment as part of the corrective process. Leo IX received the document with some caution. He agreed with Damian's condemnation of the sins, but pulled back from the most severe of his proposed remedies, concerned that the wholesale expulsion of all offenders would empty the monasteries of Europe. Leo understood something that Damian, who was a brilliant and driven man, sometimes lost sight of: that institutions require more forgiveness than they can always formally articulate. The Church has been managing this gap between formal doctrine and practical mercy for 12 centuries. Every abbess who has ever sat in a chair like the one at the north end of this chapter house has been managing it since the day she was elected. What it is, in your experience of it, is strangely clarifying. The way cold water on the face is clarifying. The way physical sensation can cut through the fog of an interior that has been circling the same ground for too long. You perform the discipline in silence, in the cell, and then you set the cord back on the shelf and recite the psalm of that hour, and you continue. On the 7th day, the abbess comes. She comes alone, without the prioress, and she sits on the edge of the pallet. You stand, because you stand in the presence of the abbess, and she looks at you for a moment before she speaks. She has the particular quality of someone who has been carrying something and has decided to set it down, at least partially, at least for the length of this conversation. She asks, "Are you well?" You say, "Yes, Reverend Mother." She says, "I did not ask whether you were complying. I asked whether you were well." You think about this. You say, "I am sad." She nods. She says that sadness is appropriate and that she would be concerned if you were not. She says, and this is not required of her, this goes beyond the formal structure of the penance visit, that the sentence she gave was the sentence she could give inside the rule that would protect you, that the alternative sentences were worse, that what she wanted to avoid, above everything, was referral to the bishop, because referral to the bishop would have meant canonical proceedings, documentation that left this house, the possibility of formal excommunication, which is the severing of a person from the sacramental life of the Church, from communion, from the last rites, from the community of the faithful, that she was not willing to do this to you. You look at the abbess. You have known her for 11 years. You have never looked at her quite like this. She says, "I am also bound by the rule, as you are." You say, "I know, Reverend Mother." She stands. She says that the penance you are observing has been observed correctly in the judgment of the prioress who reports to her. She says, "Finish what you have begun." She says, "The community is waiting for you." She leaves. You sit on the pallet. The cell is the same cell it was before she came in, and it is also different. The way a room is different after a fire has been lit in it, not in its structure, but in its quality. You turn over what she said. The threat of referral to the bishop is not a theoretical one. In a century when episcopal authority and monastic autonomy exist in a relationship that requires constant, careful management. The great reform movements of the previous century, the Gregorian Reform, the Cluniac Reform, the rise of the Cistercians under Bernard of Clairvaux, all touched, in different ways, on the question of who governs religious communities and by what authority. A house like this one, established by a charter from the local diocese, stands under the ordinary authority of the bishop. The bishop can visit. The bishop can inspect. The bishop can, in cases of serious disorder, intervene directly, sending his own representatives to examine the community, reviewing its accounts, reassigning its leadership. This has happened to other houses within the memory of people still living. It is the thing that every abbess of a well-run community works continuously and carefully to prevent. A canonical proceeding initiated by the bishop would have produced a written record. Records travel. A record that describes two named sisters of a named house in a named county produces a document that outlives the incident, that becomes part of the house's history in a form that cannot be softened by discretion or time. The 40 days in this cell is, among other things, a closed door. The matter resolved inside the house, inside the community, without a written record that goes anywhere except the abbess's own internal account, which she keeps and which ends with her. You understand this. You are grateful for it in a way that is genuine and also complicated, the way gratitude often is when it comes attached to the consequence you are grateful for being spared. You breathe. The pale slit of sky above the cell's ventilation opening is a strip of November white. You watch it change. The day moves through it, white to gray, to the brief, warmer gray of midday, to the early dark of November evening. This is your window on the world for 40 days, a strip of English sky, changing as English sky changes, which is constantly and without drama. The community is waiting for you. You recite the sext psalms from memory in the empty air. The 20 days are a particular kind of time, not empty, the opposite of empty. The cell is full of the things 40 days of solitude insist on making visible. You think about your father's house, which you have not seen since you were 14, and which you remember in fragments. The smell of the kitchen fire, the sound of your mother's particular way of walking on stone floors, the brown dog who slept by the gate. You think about the novitiate, the year of white veil, the morning you lay prostrate in the chapel and the choir sang above you, and the abbess placed the black veil on your head. You think about the 11 years of this life. The winter it was so cold the holy water froze in the font. The summer the barley harvest failed, and the community ate less and complained not at all. The death of Sister Edith, who went in 3 days from a fever, and who at the end held your hand and said something in Latin that you could not quite hear. You think about the south bed and the garlic you planted every autumn for 11 years, patient in the ground. You think about the scriptorium. On the 28th day, you think about her. The thinking comes in waves, as thinking does in solitude. You have discovered in this cell something that the busy round of the common life prevents you from discovering easily. that your mind, given no external task to move toward, moves in circles. It returns to the same things. It worries at the same seams. The novice mistresses of the contemplative tradition have written about this. John Cassian described it in his Conferences, compiled from his conversations with the desert fathers of Egypt. The mind's tendency to scatter, to return to the same concerns, to construct elaborate recapitulations of events as though re-narrating them will change their outcome. The remedy Cassian prescribes is the continuous return to a short prayer, a verse, a phrase that gives the scattered mind a center to return to when it drifts. You have been doing this. Your phrase for this 40 days is from Psalm 62. My soul cleaves to you. Your right hand holds me. 5 words in Latin, 4 beats, and you return to it whenever the mind begins to circle again. It does not stop the circling, but it gives the circling a center. The center holds, not in the diffuse, circling way you have been thinking about her, directly. You sit on the pallet in the late afternoon, when the pale light through the cell's high ventilation slit falls at its longest angle across the floor, and you think about her clearly as you copy text, with attention, without flinching, looking at what is there. What is there is this. You did not deceive yourself about what you were doing. This is important to you. Whatever the theological status of the fault, whatever the rule says, and whatever the penitential literature says, and whatever the sentence you are serving says, you were not confused. You were not carried away. You are a person who, over 3 years, came to love another person, and who understood what that love was, and who made a choice, and who is now in a cell with a knotted cord on the shelf, and all of those things are simultaneously true, and none of them cancels any of the others. This is not absolution. You are not constructing an absolution for yourself out of honesty. The rule does not care about the sophistication of your understanding of your own fault. The rule cares about the common life, the body of the community, the sign value of a group of consecrated women living in right relation to each other and to God. These are not small concerns. You believe in them, not abstractly, not theoretically, but in the concrete and specific way that 11 years of living inside them teaches. Both things are true. The love was real. The life is real. This is the specific difficulty of being a human being inside a structure built for human beings. The structure is necessary, and the thing that does not fit inside it is also real. You breathe. The pale light moves across the cell floor. The ventilation slit above your head shows a rectangle of white sky that is slowly darkening toward evening. You recite the Vespers Psalms. On the 40th day, the prioress comes for you before prime. She brings fresh water and a comb. A practical woman, the prioress, attending to what needs attending to. You wash your face and hands at the bucket and comb your hair back under the wimple and straighten the veil. Your habit needs repair at the left cuff. 5 weeks of solitude is not hard on cloth, but you have been using that cuff to clean the cell's small lamp, and it has taken the soot. You note this and put it aside. The chapter meeting is in an hour. The chapter house at Prime is the same chapter house it was 40 days ago. The same stone benches, the same morning light through the east window, the same 21 faces arranged in their customary order, looking at you in a way that contains, as far as you can read it, and you can read it, you know these faces, something other than condemnation. Most of them are simply looking at you, present, waiting to see what happens next. She is already seated when you enter. You do not look at each other. This is not the rules instruction. This is something you both understand without instruction, the way you understood many things. The abbess reads from the rule. The feast is commemorated. And then she says, "Sisters." You both stand. The abbess asks whether the penance has been observed. The prioress confirms it. The abbess asks whether the sisters request readmission to the common life of the community. You say, "Yes, Reverend Mother." She says, "Yes, Reverend Mother." The abbess says, "It is granted." This is all. You sit down. The chapter continues. After the chapter, the work assignments. You are given the infirmary. Sister Anne has requested an assistant this week, a practical decision on the abbess's part that places you in useful work that is separate from the community's main movement, that gives you a task that requires presence and care, and that does not immediately return you to the scriptorium or the choir stalls with the full weight of 40 days still fresh on you. The infirmary is the room in the East Range with its own fire, and the fire is lit and the room is warm in the specific way that only a room with its own constant fire is warm. Not the variable warmth of effort and bodies, but the settled warmth of a room that is regularly heated, that holds its temperature through the night, that smells of wood smoke and the dried herbs that hang from the ceiling beams in long bunches. Sister Anne has been managing this room for 20 years, and its organization reflects 20 years of practical knowledge. The simples, the single herb preparations, are stored separately from the compound remedies, labeled in Sister Anne's careful hand. The fresh preparations for current patients are on the shelf nearest the fire, where the temperature stays most consistent. There is one patient this week, an older sister whose chest has grown tight with the November cold, a recurrence of the same constriction that has brought her to the infirmary 2 or 3 times every winter for the past decade. She is sitting up in her bed with a cloth soaked in a decoction of hyssop and thyme held against her nose and mouth. The steam, Sister Anne explains to you, as though you have not been in this convent for 11 years, loosens what has thickened. You know this. You say, "Yes, of course." You prepare a fresh cloth. The work of the infirmary is simple and specific and requires your hands. You are grateful for your hands. You have been grateful for them in your cell in a different way, the way you are grateful for something you usually take for granted, and that the absence of its usual work has made newly visible. Your hands know the knotted cord, and they know the cold water in the bucket, and they know the pages of Psalter that you smoothed in memory for 40 mornings. And now they know the warm cloth and the hyssop steam and the patient expression of Sister Agnes, who is breathing more easily after 10 minutes and who says nothing to you about the chapter meeting, about the 40 days, about any of it, who simply receives the cloth and the steam and nods, in the manner of a person who has been ill enough times to know what is useful and what is not. This is the community waiting for you, not the formal language of readmission, not the abbess's chair. This A warm room, a sick sister, useful work, hands that know what to do. The first choir at terce, you take your stall, fourth on the north side, as it has always been, and the cantor intones, and the psalms begin. The sound fills the stone vault the same as always, voice joining voice, south and north building toward each other, the accumulated breath of 23 women making the thing that is larger than any one of them. Her voice is on the south side, the same voice, lower than the average, the slight catch at the high notes. You can find it inside the choir's sound because you have been finding it for 3 years. And now, for the first time in 40 days, you hear it in a room you are also in, and the choir's sound closes over the two of you together. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. Both of these are true at the same time, which is something you are learning to hold. The psalms continue. You sing them from the same place you have always sung them, from the body, from the 11 years of grooves worn into the mind, from the accumulated weight of all the mornings you have stood in this stall and let the words move through you. They hold the same things they have always held. They are the same size they have always been. Nothing in the psalms is smaller this morning than it was. After terce, the garden. You collect your tools and go out. The south bed, which you prepared for winter before all this began, has its garlic in the ground, planted by Sister Anne while you were confined, because the frost window does not wait for anyone. The garlic is not yet visible. It is underneath, doing its patient winter work in the cold soil, not yet showing, not yet asking to be seen. You kneel beside the bed and press your fingers into the earth. It is cold. The soil in November has a different cold from the soil in October, denser, more certain, the cold of a thing that has committed to its direction for the season. Under your fingers, a few inches down, the garlic is in the ground and alive. You cannot see this. You know it because you know this bed. The sun moves across the stone walls of the south range. The elm trees along the boundary wall are bare and patient against the November sky. The stream runs in its channel beyond the east wall, the same as always, cold and unhurried. You will be in this garden for many more years. You will plant garlic in this bed every autumn and pull it every summer, and the cycle will continue past anything you can currently see. The south bed will hold your handprints in its soil every autumn until your hands are too old to kneel here, and then perhaps another woman's hands will take over the work, and the bed will hold hers. In a house 80 years old, there have been many pairs of hands in this bed. The founding abbess planted a kitchen garden in the first year. This is recorded in the House Chronicle, maintained by successive abbesses and now kept by the current abbess with the same systematic care she applies to the financial accounts. The Chronicle records the garden's origins and its expansion, and the years when the harvest was good and the years when it was not. It records deaths and professions and the arrival of new sisters. It records the year the apple tree in the garth was struck by lightning and had to be removed, and the year its replacement was planted, and the year the replacement first bore fruit. The Chronicle will record this year also, in whatever language the abbess chooses, with whatever brevity she judges appropriate. What it records is not yours to control. What you can control is the south bed, and it is in good order, and the garlic is in the ground. This is what stabilitas means, accumulated over decades. A long conversation between a body and a piece of ground, neither of them speaking in words, both of them changed by the exchange. She will be in this community for many more years also. This is the shape of the life you have both chosen, or been given, or found, depending on which part of the story you start from. She will be in the south choir stall. In 2 days, 3 days, a week, you will be back in the scriptorium. The cathedral chapter Psalter commentary was completed by other hands while you were in your cell. You will see, when you return to the desk, the pages in another sister's handwriting, neat and correct and slightly different from yours, in the particular way that every scribe's hand is particular, carrying the history of who taught them and what texts they copied first. Your section of the work will resume at the point it stopped. The exemplar will be on the lectern. The ink will be mixed. Your ruled sheet will wait on the desk. She will be assigned to the scriptorium also, or not. The assignments rotate, and neither of you has any say in their direction. You may find yourselves side by side at the long desk as you were before. You may not for months. The abbess will make whatever arrangement she makes, and you will receive it, as you receive all assignments. Not because you feel nothing about it, but because you have made a vow, and the vow is what allows the community to function, and the community is the thing that held you and waited for you and took you back. And this counts for something. It counts for a great deal. You will be in the north. The psalms will move between you twice daily, in the company of 21 other women, for as long as your voices hold. This is the form the rest of it takes. You press your fingers into the cold earth and think about the garlic, hidden and alive, doing its quiet work in the dark. There is a category in Benedictine theology that does not often appear in the formal texts, but that exists, clearly and practically, in the lives of the women who have lived this life. The category of things carried. Things that are not confessed away or disciplined away or prayed away, that are simply carried, incorporated into the ongoing structure of the life, held without resolution, because resolution is not always the form that things take. Bernard of Clairvaux wrote about the ordered love, amor ordinatus. But Bernard had not sat in a stone cell for 40 days, with a knotted cord on the shelf and a rectangle of sky overhead. And it is possible, you think it is possible, that the ordering he describes is not always a tidy thing, that it is sometimes a carrying, that the love that has been redirected does not vanish in the redirection, but travels with you, changed in its form, present in its changed form, part of the structure of a life that continues. This is not a permission. You are not writing yourself a permission. This is simply what is true, as far as you can tell, on a November morning in the garden with your fingers in the cold ground. Sext bell. You stand. You brush the earth from your knees. You go to choir. The chapel at midday is lit by the south transept window, which at this hour throws a long bar of gray light across the middle of the choir. You take your stall. The misericord is where it always is, shaped to the angle of your hip. The Psalter is open at Psalm 119, the long psalm, the alphabetical psalm, the psalm that goes on for 22 stanzas, one for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet, returning again and again to the same themes: the steadfastness of the law, the difficulty of the road, the constancy of the intention, even when the foot slips. Your lamp is a command to my feet, it says, a light to my path. The cantor intones, the choir responds. The sound builds from south and north and fills the stone vault. You sing. Your voice finds the community's voice, and the community's voice finds yours, and together it is the sound it has always been, which is the sound of many years, which is the sound of many lives laid alongside each other in the same place for a long time, which is the sound of everything that has been brought here, the grief and the gratitude and the longing and the complexity and the faults and the mornings after faults and the continued choosing, day after day, to stand up and sing. The psalm moves through you like breath. Vespers, Compline, darkness. The great silence begins. You kneel in the chapel for the last prayers of the day. The stone floor is cold through your wool stockings. This cold has been present for 11 years, for every compline of your adult life, and you have made your peace with it in the way that you make peace with the cold of the lavatorium water and the cold of the November soil, not by ceasing to feel it, but by ceasing to be surprised. You press your palms together. Above you, the tallow candle burns low on the altar, its pale smoke rising in the still air of the chapel. Around you, 22 other women, each of them kneeling on the same cold floor, with their own hands folded and their own chests holding what they hold. You do not know what any of them carries. You know what you carry. The long interior country of another person is always finally closed to you, always finally their own. And this is not a tragedy, or not only a tragedy. It is the condition of being a self among other selves, and it holds inside it something that is very close to, though not exactly, tenderness. The candle is extinguished. The great silence begins. You walk to the dormitory, the night stairs, the corridor. Your curtain at the cell's entrance, exactly where it has always been. You lie down on the pallet. The straw has been restuffed. You feel this, the new fullness of it, the smell of fresh cut straw that the old straw had entirely lost. Someone restuffed your pallet while you were confined. You do not know who. Someone did. The stone ceiling, the elm trees, the stream. You breathe. The dormitory settles around you, Sister Claire to your right, already moving towards sleep. Somewhere 4 cells down, on the same side, a curtain hangs over a pallet where someone is also lying down in the dark, also settling, also beginning the slow turn toward whatever sleep looks like after a day like this day. You do not reach toward this. You do not need to reach toward it. It is enough to know it is there, 4 cells away, in the same building, under the same roof, inside the same common life that holds both of you, and has held you, and will go on holding you. The stream runs in its channel, It is the same stream it was before all this. It does not know what has happened in the chapter house or in the 2 cells, and it does not require knowing. It runs through the dark the same as it runs through every dark. Let it fill your ears. Let the sound of it be what the dark is made of tonight. Your breathing slows. The palate is new. The straw is fresh. The ceiling is old. The elm trees are bare and patient and entirely indifferent, and very beautiful in their bare patience, if you are in the habit of finding things beautiful, which you have found over 11 years that you are. You carried something through 40 days. The penitentials do not write about this. They write about the fault and the penance and the period of correction and the readmission. They do not write about the Tuesday after readmission, or the November 3 months after it, or the year after that. The long, ordinary time in which a person lives inside a corrected life, carrying what they carry, continuing to choose what they continue to choose. The literature of correction is concerned with the structure of the event, not with the texture of the duration. The duration is yours to find. What you are finding in these first hours back in the common life is that the community is larger than the event. It is larger than the chapter meeting, and larger than the 40 days, and larger than what happened in the scriptorium. It held all of you before the event, and it holds all of you after it. The meals in the refectory have the same food and the same reading and the same sound of spoons in bowls and Sister Joan sitting 3 places to your left, not meeting your eyes and not pointedly avoiding them either, which you take as a form of grace, which is what it is. The elms along the boundary wall are the same elms. The stream is the same stream. The south bed has garlic in it, and it will come up in March, and it is still with you, and it will be with you in the south bed tomorrow, and in the scriptorium, and in the choir, and the choir will hold it, and the garden will hold it, and the stream will hold it, and you will go on carrying it, not because you were not corrected. You were corrected correctly by a woman who was trying to protect you, but because what is real stays real, and what is real can be carried, and what is carried can be offered up, and what is offered up is received by something large enough to hold it. This is enough. This is, if you let it be, more than enough. Rest now. Let your hands be open. Let the night take everything. The Psalms will come back in the morning. They always come back in the morning. You will stand in the 4th stall on the north side, and the cantor will intone, and the choir will open, and the sound will build, and it will hold everything you bring to it, which is everything. It always has. You have been a nun for 11 years. In 11 years you have buried 3 sisters of this community and welcomed 4. You have survived a winter cold enough to crack the bell in the chapel tower, and a summer drought that reduced the fish pond by half, and required emergency purchase of preserved fish from the market town at considerable expense to the abbess's accounts. You have mended what needed mending, planted what needed planting, copied what needed copying, and sung every day in the company of women you did not choose and whom you love in the complicated, ordinary, genuine way that living alongside people for a long time produces. A love that is not excitement, not devotion in the romantic sense, but something more fundamental. The love of people who have seen each other at vigils in February and never once stopped showing up. She has been in this community for 3 years. 3 years is not 11 years. But 3 years is enough time to have seen her at vigils in February, which you have, many times, in the dark and the cold, with her voice finding its place in the choir, and the psalms moving through the stone vault, and the community present and continuing. This is what you are returning to. This is what you have been inside all along, even in the cell. Even in the 40 days, the community went on without you, and it waited for you, and it received you back. And that is what communities do. And it is a remarkable thing that this is what communities do. Sleep. That was Quiet History at Bedtime. This channel is new, and finding listeners like you, people who want to fall asleep inside history, means everything. If this was the right place for your mind tonight, please subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell. The next story is already on its way. Good night.